Here, the sharp tang of leather in my father's glove workshop. See these hands busy with stitching, a child's wonder shaped by honest works. The schoolroom is chill with chalk dust in the air, whip of birch rod sharp on the nose, voices chanting Latin as seasons turn. And at last, beneath summer dusk, the glow breathes with every heartbeat as Hamlet's words echo across timber and torchlight.
Welcome to Shakespeare's Satchel. If you enjoy these journeys into the bard's world, please like and subscribe. Where are you listening from tonight? It's April 1564, and you're nestled in a timber-framed house on Henley Street in Stratford-upon-Avon. Dawnlight filters through small diamond panes of leaded glass, casting gentle geometric patterns across lime-washed walls. The air carries the mingled scents of wood smoke from the dying hearth, dried lavender tucked between woolen blankets, and the faint earthiness of wattle and daub, that mixture of clay, straw, and animal hair that forms the walls around you. This is the world into which William Shakespeare has just been born. You pull a heavy woolen coverlet closer as morning cold seeps through the walls. Houses like this one, built with oak timber frames filled with wattle and daub, offer warmth and shelter but little defense against England's damp chill. The floorboards beneath your feet are broad oak planks, darkened with age and wear, creaking softly as you move toward the window. Through the thick, slightly warped glass, you glimpse Stratford awakening. Wisps of smoke rising from chimneys, the distant lowing of cattle being led to pasture. The house around you belongs to John Shakespeare, glover and wool dealer, a man rising in the world. The furnishings speak of modest prosperity, a carved oak chest, pewter vessels catching the morning light, and books, precious, expensive books that mark this household as one that values learning. In 1564, literacy is still rare outside London's merchant class and nobility. Yet here in this provincial market town, you're surrounded by the tools of education. From somewhere below, you hear the gentle sounds of a household stirring. The crack of kindling being added to kitchen fires, the soft splash of water being drawn from a well, the rustle of rushes scattered across floors being swept and refreshed. These are the rhythms that will shape young William's earliest memories, the daily cadences of Tudor domestic life, where survival depends on careful attention to season, weather, and community. As full daylight spreads across Stratford, you sense something profound in this moment. In rooms like this one, surrounded by the sights, sounds, and scents of Elizabethan England, a mind is awakening that will transform how humanity understands itself. The anxieties about mortality, the questions about existence and meaning that will pour forth in Hamlet's most famous soliloquy, they are already taking root here, in this world where life and death dance so closely together. You descend the narrow wooden stairs into John Shakespeare's workshop, where the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of hammer against leather creates a meditation on craft and patience. The air here is thick with the rich scent of tanned hides, cowhide, sheepskin, and the finer kidskin reserved for gentlemen's gloves. Your fingers trace the smooth surface of a workbench worn smooth by decades of use, its oak surface stained dark with oils and dyes. John Shakespeare stands at his bench, working a piece of supple leather with the steady precision of a master craftsman. In Tudor England, glovers hold respected positions in their communities. Their work requires not just skill, but an understanding of chemistry, as they transform raw hides using oak bark, alum, and other materials in the complex process of tanning. The leather beneath his hands will become gloves that protect working hands from thorns and cold, or elegant accessories that mark their wearers as people of standing. You watch as he cuts patterns with a sharp knife, each movement economical and sure. Waste means loss of profit, and every scrap of leather has value in this world where nothing can be carelessly discarded. The workshop around you holds the tools of his trade, curved needles for stitching the intricate seams, wooden forms shaped like hands for stretching the leather, and small pots containing dyes that will color the finished gloves in rich browns, deep blacks, or the coveted white that requires the most skill to achieve. The sound of the high street filters through the workshop's small windows, the clip-clop of horses, the rumble of cartwheels over packed earth, the calls of other tradesmen. Stratford-upon-Avon in the 1570s pulses with the energy of market day, when farmers and craftsmen gather to exchange goods and gossip. This is the world that shapes young William's understanding of human nature, a place where ambition and disappointment walk hand in hand, where a glover can aspire to civic office, but also face the constant threat of economic ruin. John's hands pause in their work, and you notice the slight tremor that speaks of years spent gripping tools. In this era, a man's hands tell his story, calloused from labor, marked by the small cuts and burns that come with any craft. These are the hands that will teach a young boy the value of precision, the importance of reputation, the weight of responsibility. As afternoon light slants through the workshop windows, you sense how this place of patient craftsmanship nurtures something profound. Here, in the careful transformation of raw materials into objects of beauty and utility, lies an understanding of human potential that will one day find voice in questions about existence itself. You settle onto a hard wooden bench in the single schoolroom of King Edward VI Grammar School in Stratford-upon-Avon, where dawn has not yet broken, and tallow candles cast wavering shadows across lime-washed walls. The air carries the acrid bite of smoking wicks mixed with the mustiness of well-worn books and the sharp cold that seeps through unglazed windows. Your breath forms small clouds in the chill as you lean over a horn book, a wooden paddle containing letters and simple words, protected by a thin sheet of horn. The schoolmaster moves between the benches with measured steps, his black gown rustling against the rush-strewn floor. In Tudor England, grammar schools like this one represent a revolutionary idea that boys from merchant families, not just nobility, can receive the classical education once reserved for the elite. Here, the sons of glovers, butchers and wool dealers sit alongside those of minor gentlemen, all united in the grinding discipline of Latin grammar and rhetoric. You trace your finger along lines of Latin text, feeling the slight roughness of paper made from linen rags. The curriculum here mirrors that of schools across England, hours spent passing the works of Ovid, Virgil and Cicero, memorizing vast passages of classical poetry, learning to construct arguments using the complex rhetorical devices that Roman orators perfected centuries ago. The repetition seems endless, declining nouns, conjugating verbs, translating passages that speak of gods and heroes, love and loss, ambition and downfall. Your quill scratches across the paper as you copy a passage from Ovid's Metamorphoses, the stories of transformation that will one day bloom into plays, about characters who change from princes to madmen, from innocence to experience. The ink, made from oak, gall, iron and water, flows dark and permanent, each letter requiring careful attention. Mistakes mean starting over, and paper remains too precious to waste. Around you, other boys bend over their work with the focused intensity that only strict discipline can instill. The schoolmaster's birch rod rests visibly on his desk, a reminder that learning in this era comes with immediate consequences for inattention. Yet within this rigorous structure, minds are being stretched and shaped, learning to think in multiple languages, to argue from various perspectives, to find meaning in ancient texts that seem to speak directly to contemporary concerns. As the candles burn lower and genuine daylight begins to filter through the windows, you sense something profound taking shape in this cold, austere room. The classical stories being absorbed here, tales of revenge and madness, of duty conflicting with desire, are planting seeds that will one day flower into questions about existence itself, posed by a Danish prince in words that will outlive empires. You break your fast in the pale light of a February morning in 1572, sitting at a rough wooden table, where the grain of the oak shows, through years of scrubbing with lye soap and sand. Before you lies a trencher, a thick slice of day-old bread that serves as both plate and eventual food, topped with a modest portion of pottage, that thick porridge of oats, barley, and whatever vegetables the household could afford. The pewter spoon in your hand feels cold against your fingers, its surface bearing the small dents and scratches that mark it as a family's treasured possession. Your first sip of small beer warms your throat with its mildly sour, yeasty flavor. In Tudor England, small beer, A weak brew with just enough alcohol to kill harmful bacteria serves as the daily drink for everyone from infants to elderly. The water in most towns carries too many dangers: the flux, the sweating sickness, and other ailments that can fell a strong man in days. This humble ale, brewed in households across England, represents one of the era's quiet triumphs over an environment filled with invisible threats. Beside the pottage sits a precious luxury, a small piece of manchet bread made from the finest wheat flour, its crust golden, and its crumb white as fresh snow. Unlike the coarse barley and rye bread that forms the foundation of most meals, manchet represents aspiration, the kind of bread served in gentlemen's houses, now appearing on your modest table because your father's glove-making business prospers. Each bite releases the sweet, nutty flavor of good wheat, a taste that speaks of successful harvests and careful milling. The kitchen around you bustles with the quiet efficiency of a well-managed household. Herbs hang in bundles from the rafters, rosemary for remembrance, sage for wisdom, thyme for courage, filling the air with their mingled fragrances. The great hearth dominates one wall, its fire carefully banked to provide steady heat for the day's cooking while consuming as little precious fuel as possible. Every stick of wood, every lump of charcoal must be purchased or gathered, making warmth a calculated resource. You tear another piece of manchet bread, savoring its fine texture against your tongue. Outside, the sounds of Stratford awakening drift through shuttered windows, the clip-clop of horses carrying farmers to market, the call of the town crier announcing the day's business, the distant hammering of craftsmen beginning their work. This is sustenance not just for the body, but for a mind that will spend long hours wrestling with Latin declensions and rhetorical devices. As you finish your simple meal, you sense something profound in this daily ritual of nourishment and preparation. Here, in the careful balance between necessity and small luxuries, lies an understanding of human aspiration that will one day find expression in questions about what makes existence worthwhile. You kneel on the cold stone floor of Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon, where afternoon light filters through medieval stained glass, casting jeweled patterns of ruby and sapphire across the worn limestone beneath your knees. The air carries the lingering sweetness of frankincense, mixed with the mustiness of ancient stone and the faint dampness that never quite leaves these Gothic walls. Your breath forms small clouds in the perpetual chill as you bow your head in the hushed sanctuary, where generations have wrestled with questions of mortality and meaning. The church around you bears the architectural scars of England's religious upheavals. Where once elaborate Catholic frescoes adorned the walls, fresh whitewash now covers the painted saints and biblical scenes that Henry VIII's reformers deemed idolatrous. Yet beneath this Protestant austerity, you can still trace the faint outlines of earlier devotions, ghostly figures that seem to whisper of beliefs about death and salvation that divided families and kingdoms throughout the 16th century. You run your fingers along the smooth wood of the pew, carved from English oak and polished by countless hands in prayer. In this post-Reformation world, death has become a more solitary journey. Gone are the elaborate Catholic rituals that once promised clear pathways to salvation. The masses for the dead, the intercession of saints, the careful accounting of purgatorial time. Protestant England now preaches salvation by faith alone, leaving believers to grapple more directly with questions about what lies beyond this earthly existence. The vicar's voice echoes from the stone pulpit as he reads from the Book of Common Prayer, that compromise document crafted to unite England's fractured religious landscape. His words speak of dust returning to dust, of the hope of resurrection, yet you sense beneath his measured cadence the uncertainty that haunts this age. When Catholic Mary ruled, Protestant beliefs could mean death. Now under Elizabeth, Catholic sympathies carry equal danger. The afterlife has become not just a theological question, but a political one. Sunlight shifts across the memorial brasses set into the floor, their engraved figures lying in eternal repose with hands folded in prayer. These monuments to Stratford's departed merchants and gentry speak of lives spent accumulating wealth and status, yet ended by the same universal fate that claims beggar and king alike. You trace the Latin inscriptions with your eyes, their promises of eternal rest offering comfort against the ever-present reality of plague, warfare and sudden death that shadows every Tudor life. As the service concludes and you rise from your knees, you carry with you the weight of these contradictions. Faith wrestling with doubt, hope shadowed by fear, the promise of eternal life haunted by the mystery of what form that existence might take. Here, in this place where questions outnumber answers, the seeds are planted for a future meditation on being and non-being. You pull on your woolen hose in the dim light of an early March morning in 1578, feeling the rough texture of the knitted stockings against your legs as you work them up past your knees. The wool, dyed a serviceable brown with madder and oak bark, carries the faint lanolin scent that never quite leaves garments made from English fleece. Each stocking must be secured with points, thin ribbons that tie the hose to your doublet, a daily ritual that reminds you how precarious even basic clothing can be in an age before elastic or modern fastenings. Your doublet fits snugly across your chest and shoulders, its padded interior stuffed with wool and horsehair to create the fashionable silhouette that marks you as a young man of modest but respectable station. The garment's weight surprises modern sensibilities, layers of linen, wool and leather that together form a kind of soft armor against the cold. Pewter buttons march down the front, each one representing hours of a craftsman's labor, while the sleeves are slashed to reveal glimpses of your linen shirt beneath, following a fashion that began as a way to display expensive undergarments. Around your waist, you fasten a leather girdle from which hangs your purse, a simple drawstring pouch that holds the few coins representing your family's modest prosperity, and a small eating knife, essential for meals, since forks remain unknown in most English households. The girdle pulls the doublet's fabric taut, creating the trim waistline that contemporary fashion demands, though the restriction makes deep breathing a conscious effort. Your feet settle into leather shoes, with thin soles that offer little protection from cobblestones and mud. These shoes, made by the local cordwainer using leather your father likely supplied, will need frequent repair as you walk Stratford's unpaved streets. The leather creaks softly with each step, a sound that will accompany you throughout days spent moving between school, home, and the wider world of market squares and parish churches. As you adjust the fall of your short cloak, a rectangle of coarse wool that provides some protection against spring rain, you feel the weight of expectation these clothes carry. In Tudor England, garments proclaim status, occupation and aspiration. Your modest finery marks you as neither servant nor gentleman, but something in between, a glover's son, with education enough to rise in the world, yet humble enough to remember his origins. The morning light catches the brass points and pewter buttons as you prepare to face another day of Latin lessons and theological instruction. These clothes that constrain and define you speak to larger questions about identity and freedom, about what it means to dress apart while wondering about the essential self beneath the costume. In this daily ritual of putting on the expected garments lies the seed of future meditations about authentic existence. You stand on Henley Street as twilight settles over Stratford-upon-Avon in the autumn of 1582, watching thin columns of smoke rise from chimneys into the cooling air. The acrid scent of burning wood mingles with the sweeter smell of peat and the occasional sharp tang of coal. That black stone still considered a luxury fuel in most provincial households. Each chimney tells its own story of the day's domestic struggles. The banker of glowing embers carefully preserved since dawn, the precious kindling hoarded against winter's approach, the delicate balance between warmth and economy that governs every Tudor hearth. You pull your woolen cloak tighter, as the evening breeze carries the mingled aromas of supper preparations. Onions frying in lard, bread baking in communal ovens, and the rich smell of pottage simmering in iron cauldrons suspended over kitchen fires. Windows begin to glow with the warm yellow light of rushlights, those humble candles made by dipping dried reeds in mutton fat, their flickering flames creating pools of illumination in the gathering darkness. The cobbled street beneath your feet still holds the day's warmth. though puddles from the afternoon shower reflect the first stars appearing between scudding clouds. You step carefully around the kennel, that central drainage channel running down the street's middle where household waste flows toward the River Avon. The medieval infrastructure still serves this Tudor town, a reminder that progress comes slowly to places like Stratford, where tradition and innovation exist in careful balance. From the house beside you comes the gentle sound of a lute being tuned, its strings yielding sweet tentative notes that drift through leaded casement windows slightly ajar, despite the evening chill. Music represents one of the era's purest pleasures, accessible to both merchant families who can afford instruments and servants who sing while they work. These melodies, whether complex madrigals or simple ballads, provide the soundtrack to lives lived without the mechanical entertainments that later ages will take for granted. The darkness deepens, and more windows begin to show light as families gather around their hearths for the evening meal. You catch glimpses of domestic scenes through those wavering window panes. Heads bent over wooden trenchers, children listening to stories told by firelight, adults discussing the day's business in voices too low to distinguish, but warm enough to suggest the fundamental human comfort of shared shelter and sustenance. As the last daylight fades behind the timber-framed houses with their distinctive black and white patterns, you sense the profound quiet that settles over Tudor England with each sunset. Here, in this nightly rhythm of retreat from the wider world into the sanctuary of home, lies an understanding of solitude and community that will one day find its voice in meditations about the essential loneliness of human existence. You stand in the nave of Temple Grafton Church on a crisp November morning in 1582. Where bronze bells peal overhead in the ancient rhythm that has marked life's passages for centuries across the English countryside. The sound reverberates through limestone walls blackened by centuries of candle smoke, each toll announcing to the scattered farms and villages of Warwickshire that another young couple has committed their lives to the mysterious alchemy of marriage. The air carries the mingled scents of beeswax from altar candles, dried herbs scattered across rush-strewn floors, and the faint sweetness of late autumn flowers gathered from cottage gardens, despite the approaching frost. Around you, wedding guests shift on wooden benches, worn smooth by generations of worshippers, their best clothes, marking this as a day set apart from the ordinary rhythms of harvest and household labor. The bride wears a gown of good wool dyed with costly saffron to achieve that golden yellow that Tudor brides favor, a color that speaks of prosperity and fertility. Her hair flows loose beneath a circlet of rosemary for remembrance, following customs that stretch back beyond memory into the deep traditions of English rural life. The bridegroom stands nervous but resolute in his finest doublet, its pewter buttons catching light from the tall windows. At 18 he represents the countless young men of his era, who marry suddenly and with courage that borders on recklessness, driven by passion, circumstance, and the practical necessities that govern life in a world where survival often depends on partnership. His bride, 8 years his senior, brings experience and perhaps wisdom to balance his youthful intensity. You feel the weight of expectation that surrounds this ceremony in Tudor England, where marriage represents far more than romantic union. It forms the basic economic unit of society, a partnership for survival that will determine everything from social standing to daily bread. The church's cold stone walls have witnessed countless such moments when young lives intertwine with hope and trepidation, creating the fundamental bonds that hold communities together across seasons of plenty and want. The priest's voice echoes through the sanctuary as he speaks the ancient words that transform two individuals into a single legal entity under English law. In this moment, you sense the profound mystery that marriage represented to the Elizabethan mind, a transformation as complete as any in Ovid's tales, yet achieved through simple promises spoken before God and community. As the bells continue their joyful clamour across the Warwickshire countryside, you reflect on how this moment of commitment and hope contains within it all the complexities that will one day find expression in questions about the nature of human bonds, the weight of responsibility, and what it truly means to choose one path over all others in the brief span of mortal existence. You trudge through the thick mud of the Great North Road in the spring of 1587, your leather boots squelching with each step as you make your way toward London, still 30 miles distant through the rolling countryside of southern England. The ancient Roman highway, once paved with stone, has deteriorated into a rutted track that becomes nearly impassable after heavy rains. Your stockings grow damp where the mud seeps through the worn seams of your shoes, and you can feel the cold wetness spreading up your wool hose with each laborious step. The pack on your shoulders holds everything you own: a spare shirt of coarse linen, a small testament bound in calfskin, and a precious letter of introduction to a London printer who might offer employment to a young man with grammar school Latin and a provincial's burning ambition. Around your waist, a leather pouch contains the few coins that represent your family's investment in your uncertain future, enough for lodging and meals for perhaps a week if you spend carefully. Other travellers share the muddy road: merchants leading pack horses laden with Cotswold wool, farmers driving cattle to London's insatiable markets, and fellow young men like yourself seeking their fortunes in a city that grows larger and more prosperous each year. The air carries the mingled sense of horsesweat, wet earth, and the wood smoke that rises from the chimneys of isolated farmsteads scattered across the landscape. When the wind shifts, you catch hints of something else: the vast, complex odour of London itself, still miles ahead, but already asserting its presence across the countryside. You pause to rest beside a wayside cross, its carved stone worn smooth by centuries of weather, and the touch of countless pilgrims who once travelled this same route. The monument speaks of an older England, when these roads carried monks and crusaders rather than merchants and aspiring playwrights. Your legs ache from the unaccustomed walking. In Stratford, nowhere lay more than a few minutes' stroll from anywhere else, but London demands this pilgrimage through mud and uncertainty. A cart rumbles past, its iron-bound wheels throwing up fresh spatters of mire, and you step aside to let the oxen pass. The cart nods acknowledgement, that brief courtesy between travellers that recognises the shared hardship of Tudor transport. His load of grain will feed London's growing population, while you hope to feed its growing appetite for stories, poems, and plays that make sense of this rapidly changing world. As afternoon light slants through gathering clouds, you shoulder your pack once more and continue toward the distant city. Each step forward represents a choice: to leave behind the familiar rhythms of provincial life for the unknown possibilities that await in the great metropolis, where fortunes rise and fall with the turning of a single play. You crest the final hill outside London on a grey morning in late spring 1587, and suddenly, the greatest city in England spreads before you through the lifting Thames Valley mist like a vision from some fevered dream. The first thing that strikes you is not the buildings but the smoke. Hundreds upon hundreds of chimneys sending thin columns of grey and white into the overcast sky, creating a low-hanging haze that seems to embrace the entire sprawling metropolis. The air itself tastes different here, thick with the mingled sense of wood smoke, coal fires, and something else entirely. The complex aroma of humanity concentrated as nowhere else in the realm. Through the shifting mist, you glimpse the spires that define London's skyline, the massive square tower of St. Paul's Cathedral, rising like a beacon above the crowded rooftops, and scattered around it the smaller steeples of the city's 100 parishes, each marking a community within the greater whole. The Thames curves through it all like a silver ribbon, crowded even at this early hour with wherries, those small passenger boats that serve as London's taxis, and larger vessels bringing goods from across the known world. Your eyes strain to take in details impossible from this distance: the great houses of the wealthy built along the Strand, their gardens running down to the river's edge, and the dense maze of streets and alleys that house London's 100,000 souls. This city has grown far beyond its ancient Roman walls, spilling into surrounding villages that now find themselves swallowed by the expanding metropolis. Southwark beckons from across the Thames, where you can just make out the circular shapes of playhouses rising above the bear garden and the brothels, that district where respectable London sends its less respectable entertainments. The road beneath your feet now shows stones, actual paving that speaks of civic ambition, and the wealth that flows through London's streets like lifeblood. Other travellers crowd around you now: merchants, craftsmen, country folk like yourself drawn by opportunity or necessity to this great engine of Tudor England. Their voices create a babel of dialects, Yorkshire vowels mixing with Devon burrs, Welsh lilts blending with the flat tones of East Anglia. London draws from everywhere and transforms all who enter its embrace. As you begin your descent toward the city gates, you feel the weight of possibility and peril that awaits in those teeming streets. This is where fortunes rise overnight and fall just as quickly, where a provincial glover's son might become the age's greatest poet, or die forgotten in a pest house during the next plague outbreak. Every step forward brings you closer to a future as unpredictable as it is full of promise, the perfect setting for stories about the fundamental uncertainties of human existence. You push through the crowded throng of Cheapside on a bustling Wednesday morning in 1595, where the cacophony of London's greatest market street assaults your senses with bewildering intensity. The cries of merchants hawk their wares in voices trained to carry above the din, fishmongers bellowing the freshness of their Thames catch, drapers extolling the quality of their Yorkshire woolens, and poulters, those dealers in poultry, announcing fat capons and tender pullets still warm from country coops. The cobblestones beneath your feet glisten wet with the detritus of commerce, fish scales, vegetable parings, and the ever-present mud that combines London's clay soil with the refuse of 100,000 inhabitants. Your nostrils fill with a symphony of aromas that defines Tudor London at its most vital. The sharp tang of aged cheese wheels stacked high on wooden counters, the yeasty sweetness of fresh bread from the bakers' stalls, and the metallic scent of blood from the butchers' shambles where carcasses hang in neat rows. Beneath it all runs the constant undertone of unwashed humanity, pressed together in pursuit of daily necessities, their woolen clothes carrying the smoke of countless hearth-fires. You duck beneath a wooden sign that creaks in the morning breeze, its painted image of a golden fleece marking a mercer's shop, those vital merchants who deal in luxury fabrics imported from the Low Countries and beyond. Through diamond-paned windows you glimpse bolts of silk, the color of sunrise, and fine laces that represent months of skilled needlework. These treasures from across Europe flow into London like tributaries feeding the Thames, making this single street a crossroads of international trade. The crowd presses around you with the restless energy of commerce, apprentices shouldering their way through with bundles of goods, housewives examining vegetables with the sharp eye that comes from managing modest budgets, and gentlemen servants purchasing delicacies for their masters' tables. Children dart between the adults' legs, some running errands but others working as cunning pickpockets, who know that prosperity and desperation often walk hand in hand through these streets. A church bell tolls the hour from one of the parish steeples that rise above the market stalls, reminding all within earshot that even in this most worldly of settings, eternity hovers just beyond the immediate concerns of profit and survival. The sound mingles with the earthier music of London commerce, the rumble of cartwheels over stone, the splash of dirty water thrown from upper windows, and the endless human voices negotiating the daily miracle of urban survival. As you navigate this river of humanity flowing through London's commercial heart, you sense how this intense concentration of ambition and necessity breeds both the greatest achievements and deepest anxieties of the age, the perfect crucible for questions about what makes existence meaningful. You turn into Bread Street, one of London's countless narrow alleys that branch off from the great commercial arteries like veins carrying the lifeblood of Tudor commerce. Here in these shadowed lanes, barely wide enough for two people to pass without brushing shoulders, apprentices conduct the daily theatre of street selling, with voices trained to pierce through the urban din. The overhanging upper stories of timber-framed buildings lean so close together they nearly touch, creating a twilight world where noon feels like evening, and every sound echoes with peculiar intensity. A baker's apprentice hurries past, balancing a wooden tray of hot cross buns on his head, while calling his wares in the sing-song rhythm that marks professional street vendors. His voice carries the particular cadence of London commerce, urgent yet melodic, designed to catch attention without seeming desperate. The sweet aroma of currants and spices follows in his wake, mingling with the less pleasant scents that accumulate in these poorly ventilated spaces. rotting straw from the kennel running down the alley's centre, the acrid smoke of tallow candles from workshop windows, and the ever-present mustiness of damp wool. You press yourself against a doorway as a goldsmith's apprentice squeezes past, carrying a leather satchel that likely contains more wealth than most Londoners see in a lifetime. These young men, bound to their masters for 7 years, represent one of the city's most vital institutions, the guild system that transforms country boys into skilled craftsmen while maintaining the quality standards that make London goods sought after across Europe. Their calls echo off the narrow walls as they announce available services, mending, polishing, custom work, for those with coin to spend. The buildings around you tell stories of urban ingenuity, born from necessity. Every square foot of space serves multiple purposes. Shop fronts at street level, workshops on the first floor, and living quarters tucked into whatever space remains. Signs hang at dangerous angles overhead, a wooden boot marking a cobbler's shop, a painted glove advertising a competitor to the trade you knew in Stratford, and the 3 golden balls that universally mark a pawnbroker's establishment, where desperate Londoners convert possessions into temporary survival. Light filters down through the narrow gap between rooflines, creating shifting patterns on the worn cobblestones below. In these compressed spaces, you can hear fragments of a dozen conversations. Apprentices negotiating prices, housewives bargaining for better terms, masters instructing their charges in the ancient mysteries of their crafts. The human voice becomes the primary currency here, where reputation, and the ability to inspire trust, often matter more than the quality of goods on display. As you navigate this maze of ambition and survival, you sense how these narrow confines breed both community and claustrophobia, the perfect environment for minds that will eventually ponder whether existence itself can become too constrained to bear. You stand amid the bustle of a theatre construction site in Southwark during the summer of 1599, where the sweet scent of fresh-cut English oak mingles with the earthy aroma of sawdust that carpets the muddy ground beneath your feet. The air resonates with the rhythmic hammering of carpenters and the sharp rasp of saws biting through timber as skilled craftsmen shape the bones of what will become the Globe Theatre. Each breath you take carries the resinous perfume of newly worked wood, a smell that speaks of forests transformed into dreams, of trees that once swayed in Hampshire becoming the framework for stories that will outlast empires. Around you, master carpenters move with the confident precision that comes from generations of inherited knowledge, their hands reading the grain of each beam, like scholars parsing Latin texts. These men understand timber as intimately as any scholar knows his books, knowing which oak will bear the weight of galleries packed with playgoers, which joints will hold firm through decades of London's damp winters and sweltering summers. Their leather aprons are dusted white with wood shavings that catch the morning light like snow, and their tools, chisels, mallets and marking gauges, show the wear of countless projects that have shaped London's growing skyline. You watch as they raise the great posts that will support the theatre's circular frame, each timber carefully selected from trees that grew for centuries before meeting their destiny in this place of transformation. The construction follows ancient principles of English carpentry, mortise and tenon joints that require no nails, wooden pegs that will expand and contract with the seasons, creating a structure that breathes with the rhythms of the natural world from which it came. The sound of adzes, those curved cutting tools that smooth rough planks into finished surfaces, creates a percussive symphony punctuated by the calls of workmen coordinating their efforts. Apprentices scurry between the master craftsmen, carrying tools and clearing away the continuous shower of wood chips and shavings that mark progress toward completion. The Thames laps gently at the nearby shore, its waters reflecting the growing skeleton of timber that will soon house the most ambitious theatrical enterprise England has ever known. As afternoon light slants through the emerging framework, casting geometric shadows across the construction site, you sense something profound taking shape here. This is more than mere building. It represents a new kind of sacred space, where human stories will be told and retold, where audiences will gather to confront the deepest questions about existence and meaning. The honest smell of wood and honest labor of skilled hands are creating a temple dedicated to the exploration of what it means to be human in an uncertain world. You settle into a shadowed corner of the George Inn in Shoreditch on a November evening in 1600, where the Lord Chamberlain's men gather around a flickering hearth to rehearse their latest tragedy. The tavern's low-beamed ceiling traps the smoke from tallow candles and the great fire, creating an intimate cocoon of warm amber light that dances across weathered oak walls. The air carries the mingled aromas of roasting mutton, spilled ale, and the wool and leather of actors' working clothes, still damp from the autumn drizzle that perpetually haunts London streets. Around a scarred wooden table, players lean over manuscript pages, precious handwritten parts copied by hired scribes from the author's foul papers, those rough drafts that capture genius in its rawest form. In this era before printed plays, each actor receives only his own lines and cues, making rehearsals a process of discovery as much as preparation. The lead player holds his part close to a candle's flame, squinting at the secretary hand that transforms thoughts into the strange alchemy of performance. The familiar sounds of tavern life provide a constant backdrop: the clink of pewter tankards, the scrape of benches across rush-strewn floors, and the low murmur of conversations conducted in the dozen dialects that London's growth has drawn from across England. Yet here in this corner, something extraordinary unfolds, as grown men transform themselves into Danish princes and troubled scholars, their voices rising and falling in the measured cadences of blank verse that will soon move audiences to tears and wonder. You watch as they work through a particularly challenging soliloquy, each actor offering subtle interpretations that reveal the text's layered meanings. Their faces, illuminated by the unstable candlelight, show the concentration of craftsmen mastering their trade. Men who understand that tomorrow's performance before 2,000 Londoners will succeed or fail based on this evening's patient work. The gesture of a hand, the emphasis on a single syllable, the pause that allows silence to speak as eloquently as words. All these details receive careful attention. The fire crackles and settles, sending fresh shadows dancing across the scene, as these players prepare to explore the darkest questions that haunt human existence. In this humble tavern, surrounded by the ordinary business of eating, drinking and seeking warmth against the November cold, men rehearse words that will wrestle with mortality, duty, and the terrible freedom that comes with consciousness itself. As the evening deepens, and the rehearsal continues, you sense the profound mystery of theatrical art. How words written in a Southwark lodging house can be transformed by firelight and human voice into something that illuminates the deepest corners of the human condition, making the temporary eternal, and the personal universal. You stand on the muddy foreshore of the Thames, at low tide, in the autumn of 1601, where the retreating waters have exposed a glistening expanse of dark silt that stretches from bankside toward the distant northern shore. The air fills your nostrils with the complex perfume of tidal London, brackish water mingling with the detritus of 100,000 lives, seaweed rotting in the October sun, and the sharper tang of salt carried up from the distant sea. Gulls wheel overhead in raucous clouds, their cries echoing off the timber walls of warehouses and the stone arches of London Bridge, as they dive for the treasures that each receding tide reveals. Your boots sink slightly into the soft mud with each step, the Thames clay clinging with sucking persistence that speaks to the river's ancient power to claim and hold whatever touches its banks. This exposed riverbed serves as London's great scavenger ground, where mudlarks, the poorest of the city's children, wade through the muck searching for dropped coins, lost buttons, or fragments of metal that might fetch a few pence from the rag and bone men. Their small figures dot the foreshore like hunched birds, their hands black with Thames mud, as they sift through centuries of accumulated London life. The smell grows stronger as you venture closer to the water's edge, where the retreating tide has left behind pools that reflect the grey autumn sky like scattered mirrors. Here lies everything London discards: broken pottery that once held a merchant's wine, leather shoe soles worn through by countless miles on cobblestone streets, and the bones of meals consumed in taverns that overlook this very shore. The river serves as the city's great digestive system, carrying away what London cannot use while depositing the sediment of human ambition in layers that future archaeologists will read, like the pages of a vast book. Above you, the timber galleries of the Globe Theatre rise from Bankside like the ribs of some great beached whale, their thatched roof dark against the cloudy sky. The Playhouse stands as testimony to human aspiration, built literally upon London's waste. The reclaimed marshland of Southwark that serves as home to everything the respectable city prefers to keep across the water. Bear-baiting arenas, brothels and theatres cluster together in this district, where entertainment mingles with enterprises that polite society needs, but prefers not to acknowledge. As the Thames laps gently at the mud around your feet, carrying with it the whispered secrets of upstream villages and the salt promises of distant oceans, you sense something profound in this daily rhythm of ebb and flow. Here, where England's greatest river reveals and conceals its treasures with each turning tide, lies a perfect metaphor for the human condition itself, the constant movement between revelation and mystery that will soon find its voice in questions about being and non-being. You join the steady stream of humanity flowing across London Bridge, on a crisp December morning in 1601, where the ancient stone structure serves as both thoroughfare and thriving commercial district, suspended above the dark waters of the Thames. The bridge beneath your feet spans nearly a quarter mile, its 19 arches supporting not just a roadway, but an entire community of shops, houses and chapels that have grown like barnacles on this vital link between London proper and the unruly liberties of Southwark. The narrow roadway forces you into close proximity with fellow travellers, wool merchants leading pack trains bound for continental markets, pilgrims carrying staffs and wearing the broad-brimmed hats that mark them as seekers of distant shrines, and housewives balancing baskets of provisions purchased from the bridge's own shops. The air carries a symphony of urban scents, fresh bread from bakers, stalls built directly into the bridge's structure, the leather and lanolin of passing wool shipments, and the ever-present Thames flowing 30 feet below with its cargo of sewage and commerce. Above you, the timber-framed upper stories of houses lean precariously over the roadway, their occupants having built upward through generations, until some buildings span the entire width of the bridge like inhabited tunnels. Laundry flutters from these upper windows, and you catch glimpses of domestic life through leaded casements. Children peering down at the passing parade, merchants counting coins at their counting boards, and apprentices tending small fires that add wisps of smoke to the morning air. The shops lining both sides of the roadway display the wealth that flows through London like the river beneath. Goldsmiths offering plate that catches the weak winter sunlight, mercers selling silks imported from distant Cathay, and haberdashers displaying the pins, ribbons and small luxuries that mark London's growing prosperity. Their painted signs creak in the Thames breeze, a golden fleece here, a pair of spectacles there, creating a visual language that serves the many who cannot read the written word. Halfway across, you pause at the small chapel of St. Thomas Becket, where travellers traditionally offer prayers for safe passage. The ancient stones have witnessed centuries of pilgrims, merchants and ordinary Londoners, seeking divine protection for their journeys across water that has claimed countless lives. Through the chapel's small windows, you glimpse candles flickering before painted saints, their faces worn smooth by centuries of devotion and doubt. As you continue toward the northern shore, the Thames spreads below you like a liquid highway, carrying the hopes and fears of an empire. Barges loaded with coal from Newcastle pass beneath the arches, while tiny wherries dodge between larger vessels like water beetles skimming the surface. This bridge connects more than two banks. It links past and future, tradition and innovation, in the endless human endeavor to cross the uncertain waters that separate what is from what might be. You approach the great western doors of St. Paul's Cathedral, on a sweltering July morning in 1593, where the weekly plague bills hang like grim sentinels, announcing London's struggle against the pestilence that has gripped the city for months. The parchment notices, nailed to the ancient oak with iron tacks, flutter slightly in the humid breeze that offers no relief from the oppressive heat. Your eyes scan the careful script that records the previous week's mortality: 37 dead of plague in the parish of St. Giles Cripplegate, 21 in St. Botolph Aldgate, 43 in the crowded tenements of St. Catherine by the Tower. The cathedral's limestone walls radiate heat absorbed during the morning hours, while the great medieval structure looms above you like a monument to both divine protection and human vulnerability. Around the building's base, Londoners gather in small clusters to read the weekly tallies, their faces bearing the careful neutrality that comes from living with constant uncertainty. Some wear pomanders, small perforated balls filled with aromatic herbs, pressed to their noses, believing that sweet scents can ward off the corrupted air that many think carries the disease. The smell of the city in plague time mingles unpleasantly in the still air. The vinegar used to cleanse infected houses, the smoke from fires burning continuously in the streets as a supposed purification, and beneath it all the underlying odor of fear and decay that no amount of aromatics can entirely mask. Water carriers move past with leather buckets, their usual calls muted in deference to the households marked with red crosses and the painted words, "Lord have mercy upon us," that identify homes where the plague has struck. You notice how the bills record not just plague deaths, but the full catalogue of mortality that haunts Elizabethan London: consumption, fever, aged, childbed, and the mysterious rising of the lights that physicians struggle to understand. These weekly accountings represent more than statistics. They chronicle the individual tragedies of laundresses and merchants, apprentices and gentlewomen, all made equal by the democracy of death that recognizes no distinction of rank or wealth. The cathedral bells remain silent, their bronze voices stilled by order of the authorities who fear that funeral knells would ring continuously if they marked each passing. Instead, a profound quiet settles over this part of London, broken only by the occasional rumble of the dead carts making their rounds and the soft prayers of those who pause before the plague bills to search for familiar names among the weekly harvest of mortality. As you step back from the posted notices, the weight of so much accumulated grief settles around you like the heavy summer air. Here, in these simple tallies of human loss, lies the stark reality that will one day find expression in profound questions about the value of existence, when balanced against the certainty of suffering and the mystery of what awaits beyond this troubled life. You walk through the unnaturally quiet streets of Southwark in August 1593, where the playhouses stand shuttered and silent, their timber galleries empty of the voices that usually fill them with laughter, tears, and applause. The Rose Theatre looms before you like a sleeping giant, its thatched roof dark against the overcast sky, while weeds begin to sprout between the cobblestones of its entrance courtyard. The air carries none of the usual bustle of theatrical life, no apprentices hawking nuts and ale, no musicians tuning their instruments, no excited chatter of audiences gathering for the afternoon's entertainment. The Privy Council's order hangs posted on the theatre doors, its official seal marking the suspension of all public performances until the plague subsides. When weekly death tolls exceed 30 in the city, the authorities close these places where crowds gather, believing that the pestilence spreads through such assemblies like wildfire through dry timber. The players have scattered like autumn leaves, some joining travelling companies that venture into the countryside, others taking whatever work they can find, and a few simply disappearing into the hungry streets of a city where survival has become everyone's primary performance. You peer through gaps in the shuttered galleries, glimpsing the empty yard where groundlings usually press close to the stage, their faces upturned in wonder or shock as stories unfold before them. The stage itself, that wooden world where kings and beggars alike find voice, stands bare under its canopy, waiting for actors who may not return, and audiences who may not survive, to see another play. Costumes hang forgotten in the tiring house, the backstage area where players transform themselves, while props gather dust in corners where they await resurrection. The silence extends beyond the theatres to the streets themselves, where windows remain shuttered, and few dare venture out, except for necessities. Those who do walk quickly, handkerchiefs pressed to their faces, avoiding eye contact that might acknowledge the shared fear that has settled over London like a suffocating blanket. The alehouses that once rang with post-performance discussions stand half empty, their keepers serving customers who speak in hushed tones of neighbours taken by the sickness and prayers offered for deliverance. Even the Thames seems subdued, its usual river traffic reduced to essential barges carrying food and coal. The wherrymen who once ferried playgoers between the north and south banks now find their services less needed, as London turns inward upon itself, like a wounded animal seeking solitude to heal or die. The bells that might ring for evening service sound muffled in the thick summer air, their bronze voices carrying news that few wish to hear. In this suspended animation of a plague-stricken city, where the boundary between life and death becomes terrifyingly thin, you sense the birth pangs of questions that will echo through future stages, meditations on existence itself when faced with mortality's daily presence, reflections on whether being can justify its own suffering. You sit in a cramped chamber above a Southwark tavern in the winter of 1601, where the only sounds breaking the evening stillness are the scratch of quill against parchment and the distant murmur of voices from the taproom below. A single tallow candle gutters on your writing table, its uncertain flame casting wavering shadows across the manuscript pages scattered before you like fallen leaves. The acrid smoke from the cheap candle mingles with the smell of dampness that never quite leaves these riverside lodgings, where the Thames mist seeps through every gap in the timber walls. Your fingers, stained black with ink made from oak, gall, and iron, guide the goose quill across paper that represents a significant expense, each sheet precious enough that every word must justify its place. The ink flows thick and dark in the cold air, requiring frequent warming over the candle flame to prevent it from becoming too viscous to write with. You pause occasionally to sharpen the quill with a small penknife, cutting away the worn tip to maintain the fine point necessary for the secretary hand that transforms thoughts into the strange alchemy of written words. The manuscript before you bears the marks of extensive revision, lines crossed out, words inserted above others, entire passages rewritten in the margins, as inspiration demands changes that threaten to overwhelm the page's capacity. This is the messy reality of creation in an age before printing makes multiple drafts affordable. Each alteration must be weighed carefully, because starting over means the expense of fresh paper, and the labor of recopying everything that remains worthy of preservation. Through the thin walls you hear the sounds of Southwark settling into night, the clip-clop of late horses crossing the cobblestones, the closing of shutters as shopkeepers secure their premises, and the occasional burst of laughter from tavern patrons who have found temporary refuge from winter's grip and life's uncertainties. The brazier in the corner provides minimal warmth, its glowing coals, a luxury that comes at the cost of tomorrow's meals, yet necessary to prevent the ink from freezing in its horn container. Your breath forms small clouds in the frigid air as you lean closer to the manuscript, struggling to capture in words the profound questions that have been haunting your thoughts. The plague years have passed, but their shadow lingers in every line you write, the memory of closed theatres, silent streets, and the arbitrary nature of who lives and who dies. These experiences press upon the page, like invisible hands, shaping every phrase about existence and its discontents. As the candle burns lower and the night deepens around your solitary vigil, you sense that these scratches of ink on expensive paper are reaching toward something universal, questions about life and death, action and paralysis, that will speak to souls not yet born in circumstances not yet imagined. You set down your goose quill with a trembling hand, flexing fingers that have grown stiff and cramped from hours of continuous writing in the bitter February cold of 1601. The ink stains on your fingertips have deepened to an almost permanent black, the occupational mark of those who labor with words in an age when writing remains a physical ordeal. Your wrist aches with the peculiar pain that comes from maintaining the precise angle necessary for secretary hand, that elegant but demanding script that transforms the mind's chaos into orderly lines across expensive paper. The small horn inkwell before you holds the last dregs of ink made from crushing oak galls, those round swellings that form on oak trees when wasps lay their eggs in the bark. Mixed with iron filings and gum arabic, then dissolved in wine or water, this concoction creates the deep black fluid that has flowed from your pen for the past 3 hours without pause. Each dip of the quill requires careful attention. Too much ink, and it blots across the costly paper. Too little, and the words fade to illegibility. Your back protests against the hard wooden stool that serves as your writing chair, while your shoulders bunch forward in the hunched posture that candlelight writing demands. The tallow candle has burned low, its pool of melted fat spreading across the pewter holder, threatening to extinguish the flame that makes this nocturnal labor possible. In winter lodgings where every stick of firewood must be purchased, writing by night becomes an expensive luxury that competes with warmth for your meager resources. The manuscript pages spread before you bear witness to the physical demands of creation, not just the words themselves, but the ink blots where your tired hand has wavered, the slight tremor visible in lines written as exhaustion overcame precision. Each page represents not only intellectual labor, but the bodily cost of transforming thought into permanent form. Your eyes water from the strain of reading your own cramped handwriting by uncertain candlelight, while your neck protests the constant bending required to work so close to the page. You pause to warm your writing hand over the dying candle flame, feeling the blessed heat penetrate joints stiffened by cold and repetitive motion. The simple act of forming letters, the careful loops of secretary script, the precise spacing that makes words legible, becomes increasingly difficult as the night progresses, and your body rebels against the unnatural posture that writing demands. Yet something drives you forward, some inner compulsion that makes the physical discomfort seem insignificant, compared to the urgency of capturing these particular thoughts about existence and its burdens. As you prepare to take up the quill once more, despite the protests of flesh and bone, you embody the fundamental paradox of human creativity, the way mortal, suffering bodies give birth to immortal words that will outlast the hands that wrote them and speak to hearts not yet beating. You push through the crowd gathering in the Globe Theatre's central yard on a bright afternoon in June 1601, where the summer sun beats down on the uncovered space that serves as both standing room and democratic meeting ground for London's working classes. The air thrums with anticipation, as apprentices freed from their workshops, watermen taking respite from the Thames, and serving women with precious pennies to spend press close together in the circular pit that surrounds the stage. Their bodies generate a rising warmth that mingles the sense of honest sweat, wool dampened by recent rain, and the lingering aromas of the midday meals they've consumed. Onions, bread and small beer that fuel London's labouring masses. Around you, the groundlings, those hardy souls who pay just a penny for the privilege of standing through an entire performance, stake out their positions with the practiced efficiency of seasoned playgoers. A blacksmith's apprentice elbows his way closer to the stage, his leather apron still dusted with forge ash, while a cluster of seamstresses clutch their skirts to avoid the mud and rushes scattered across the earthen floor. The penny they've each paid represents a significant portion of a day's wages, making this afternoon's entertainment a carefully considered luxury rather than casual diversion. The three-tiered galleries rise around you like the walls of a wooden amphitheatre, their covered seats filled with merchants, their wives, and the occasional gentleman slumming among the common folk. From the upper galleries, nutshells and apple cores occasionally rain down, whether from carelessness or commentary remains unclear. The mingled voices create a constant buzz of conversation in half a dozen dialects, as London's growth has drawn people from every corner of England to this great melting pot of commerce and culture. Vendors move through the crowd hawking refreshments, roasted hazelnuts in paper twists, bottled ale carried in leather costrals, and gingerbread shaped like kings and queens that children clutch while awaiting the performance. The sellers' cries blend with the general hubbub as friends recognize each other across the crowd, apprentices share gossip from their respective trades, and arguments break out over the merits of various players and plays they've seen in competing theatres. Above the stage, the rectangular canopy known as the heavens blocks the worst of the sun's glare, while providing a sounding board that will project the actors' voices across this human sea. Painted with stars and celestial figures, it reminds all present that the stories about to unfold exist in a realm beyond the immediate concerns of daily survival, yet speak directly to the hopes and fears that animate every life gathered in this wooden circle. As the crowd settles into expectant quiet, you sense the unique magic of this moment when ordinary Londoners transform into a community united by shared attention, ready to receive words that will probe the deepest mysteries of human existence. You stand transfixed in the globe's packed yard as the Danish prince steps forward into the afternoon sunlight. His black doublet a stark contrast to the bright June day, and the thousand voices around you fall to absolute silence. The sudden hush feels almost physical after hours of constant chatter and movement. Even the vendors have stopped their hawking, sensing that something extraordinary is about to unfold. The actor's face, pale with white lead powder that catches the light filtering through the open roof, turns toward the assembled multitude as he prepares to bare his soul to this democratic crowd of apprentices, merchants, and groundlings. Around you, bodies press closer together as people strain to hear every word, their breathing creating the only sound in this wooden amphitheatre. The seamstresses who giggled during the comic scenes now clutch each other's hands, while the blacksmith's apprentice beside you has forgotten to wipe the sweat from his soot-streaked face. These are people who understand suffering, who have watched neighbors die of plague, who work from dawn to dusk for survival, who know that life hangs by threads as fragile as spider silk. When the first words emerge from the stage, that famous question that cuts to the heart of human existence, you feel the collective intake of breath from 2,000 souls who recognize their own deepest fears given voice. The actor's delivery is neither rushed nor theatrical but conversational, as if he were speaking directly to each person in this crowd about the weight of simply being alive. His voice carries clearly across the circular space, each syllable falling like a stone into the still water of collective attention. The audience responds with a visceral recognition that transcends class and education. The waterman who ferries bodies to unmarked graves during plague seasons nods grimly at words about death's unknown territory. The serving woman who tends sick children understands the exhaustion that makes non-existence seem appealing. These groundlings live daily with the harsh mathematics of survival that make Hamlet's philosophical wrestling match feel immediate and personal, rather than abstract. As the soliloquy continues, you notice how still the crowd has become. No shifting feet, no whispered comments, no rustling of fabric. Even the occasional baby has stopped crying, as if sensing the gravity of this moment. The afternoon sun, slanting through the open roof, illuminates faces marked by genuine contemplation, showing how art can transform a rowdy crowd into a congregation wrestling with the deepest questions of existence. In this suspended moment, surrounded by the breathing presence of London's working masses, you witness the democratic power of theatre to make universal the most intimate struggles. Here, in this circular wooden world, a Danish prince's questions about life and death become every person's questions, proving that some human experiences transcend all boundaries of time, place, and circumstance. You pull your woolen cloak tighter as bitter December wind cuts through the Globe Theatre's open roof in 1601, where grey clouds scud overhead and threaten snow that will soon blanket London in pristine white. The theatre's circular wooden frame offers little protection from the elements. Its open-air design that brings summer sunshine into the performance space now channels winter's fury directly onto the stage and into the galleries. Your breath forms crystalline clouds as you settle onto the hard wooden bench, the oak planking so cold it seems to leach warmth from your body through layers of wool and linen. Around you, the hardy souls who brave winter performances huddle together for warmth, their cloaks and mantles creating a patchwork of browns and greys that mirror the season's muted palette. Serving braziers, small metal vessels filled with glowing coals, dot the galleries, their orange light flickering like captured stars, while providing precious circles of warmth for those who can afford the extra penny. The acrid smoke from these portable fires mingles with the steam of collective breath, creating a haze that softens the harsh angles of the theatre's timber frame. The stage below, exposed to the full force of the wind, presents a challenging arena for any performance. Actors must project their voices not only across the circular space, but against the constant whistle and moan of air moving through the theatre's wooden ribs. Their costumes, The company's most valuable possessions after the playbooks themselves, flutter and snap in the gusts, transforming every gesture into a battle against the elements. Yet there is something fitting about watching a tragedy in such conditions, where the very air seems charged with the melancholy that winter brings. The thin December light filtering through the overcast sky creates an almost monochromatic world, where shadows and highlights merge into subtle gradations of grey. This natural lighting transforms the theatre into something resembling a great church or cathedral, a sacred space where human stories unfold against the backdrop of mortality that winter always brings. The cold makes every moment precious, every word more urgent, as if the season itself reminds all present of life's fragility. Your fellow playgoers stamp their feet and rub their hands together, creating a percussion of survival that underscores the performance. Children press close to their parents, while apprentices share body warmth with the easy camaraderie of those who work outdoors in all weather. The vendors who usually hawk refreshments have retreated to whatever sheltered corners they can find, leaving the audience to sustain themselves on whatever warmth they can generate, through proximity and shared attention. As the winter wind continues its relentless song through the theatre's framework, you sense how this harsh season strips away all but the essential, leaving only the fundamental questions about existence, endurance, and what makes life worth living, despite its trials. You edge closer to the glowing brazier that casts its circle of warmth across your section of the globe's middle gallery, where the first tentative snowflakes drift through the open roof, like theatrical effects conjured by winter itself. The iron vessel holds glowing charcoal that radiates blessed heat, its orange light dancing across the faces of fellow playgoers, who have arranged themselves in a careful democracy around the portable fire. The acrid sweetness of burning coal mingles with the wool and leather scents of winter clothing, as everyone presses closer, seeking comfort against the December cold that seems to seep through the very timber of the theatre walls. Around this small hearth, strangers become temporary companions in survival, sharing the universal intimacy that comes from huddling against harsh weather. A merchant's wife lifts her gloved hands toward the coals, steam rising from her damp woolen cloak, while an apprentice rubs his chilblained fingers together with the practiced patience of someone who works outdoors regardless of season. The brazier creates its own microclimate in the vast theatre, where breath no longer forms visible clouds and fingers regain enough flexibility to applaud when the performance demands it. The snow falls more steadily now, each flake catching what little light remains in the grey afternoon, before settling on the stage below, or melting against the warm faces of the audience. Those unlucky enough to sit directly beneath the open roof brush, accumulating snow from their shoulders and caps, while the galleries provide partial shelter that makes winter theatre-going possible, if not comfortable. The snow transforms the theatre's acoustics, muffling the usual street sounds from beyond the walls, and creating an intimate cocoon of performance space, wrapped in winter silence. You watch as the actors below adapt to these conditions with the professional resilience that marks their craft. Their breath creates dramatic clouds as they speak, unintentionally adding visual poetry to every line, while their movements become more deliberate as they navigate the increasingly slippery stage. The natural lighting grows dimmer with each passing minute, lending an almost mystical quality to the performance, as day fades toward the early dusk that December brings to London. The brazier beside you settles with a soft whisper of shifting coals, sending up fresh sparks that mirror the snowflakes drifting down from the pewter sky. Other fires glow throughout the galleries like scattered stars, each one surrounded by its own small community of warmth-seekers who have chosen human stories over comfort, art over ease. The theatre attendants move carefully between these points of light, adding fresh fuel to keep the fires burning throughout the performance. In this marriage of elemental cold and human warmth, of natural beauty and artificial light, you experience the profound intimacy that winter brings to all shared experiences. The way harsh conditions strip away pretense and reveal the fundamental human need for warmth, shelter, and stories that make endurance meaningful. You run your fingers across a bolt of midnight blue velvet in the tire-master's workshop near Blackfriars in the spring of 1601, where the Lord Chamberlain's men store their most precious theatrical treasures, the costumes that transform common players into kings, queens, and Danish princes. The fabric feels impossibly soft beneath your touch, its pile catching the light that streams through diamond-paned windows, and reflecting it back in subtle waves of indigo and black. This single length of cloth represents more wealth than most Londoners see in a year, imported from the looms of Italy, where silkworms and skilled weavers create textures that seem to capture light itself. The tiremaster, the craftsman responsible for the company's costumes and their maintenance, moves between hanging garments with the reverence of a cathedral keeper tending sacred vestments. His workshop holds the visual magic that makes theatre possible. Doublets slashed with cloth of silver that catch stage light like captured stars, farthingales that transform boy actors into convincing queens, and the rich black garments that mark tragedy's protagonists. Each costume hangs from wooden pegs like sleeping personalities, waiting to animate whatever player steps into their embrace. You breathe in the complex aroma of this textile treasury, the faint mustiness of wool dyed with precious cochineal beetles to achieve that perfect crimson. The sharp scent of sizing used to stiffen ruffs into perfect cartwheel configurations. And underneath it all, the lingering perfume of rosewater and ambergris used to freshen garments between performances. The workshop occupies the ground floor of a timber-framed building, its low-beamed ceiling creating an intimate space where needle meets thread in the endless work of maintaining illusion. Rolls of silk in jewel tones line wooden shelves like bottled rainbows, emerald green that will become a forest sprite's costume, golden yellow that transforms actors into sunshine personified, and the deep purples reserved for royalty both real and imagined. The tiremaster's apprentice works at a small table near the window, his young fingers practicing the tiny stitches required for the decorative work that makes costumes worthy of nobles' eyes. Each stitch represents hours of labor that audience members will glimpse for mere moments before the scene changes and the magic shifts. The late afternoon light filtering through the casement windows illuminates motes of colored thread and fabric dust dancing in the air like miniature celebrations of texture and hue. In this quiet sanctuary of creativity, where silk becomes character and velvet transforms into nobility, you sense the fundamental alchemy of theatre, the way simple materials, guided by human skill and imagination, create the visual poetry that helps audiences believe in stories that illuminate the deepest truths about existence itself. Here, among these sleeping costumes, lies the wardrobe from which Hamlet's melancholy will be dressed, giving physical form to the internal darkness that questions the very nature of being. You listen from the shadows of the Blackfriars tiring house, the backstage area where theatrical transformations occur, as three boy apprentices practice their feminine voices in the golden afternoon light of May 1601. Their clear, unbroken tones float through the timber-framed space like music, each young actor working to perfect the delicate modulation that will convince audiences they are witnessing Ophelia's madness or Gertrude's guilt, rather than apprentice players in borrowed gowns. The air carries the mingled scents of lavender water used to freshen costumes, and the beeswax that waterproofs the white lead paint these boys will wear to achieve the pale complexions that mark feminine beauty in Elizabethan England. The eldest apprentice, perhaps 14 years old, practices the speech rhythms of noble women, his voice lifting and falling in the measured cadences that distinguish court ladies from commoners. His companions, younger still, work on the physical gestures that complete the illusion, the careful way they hold their hands, the precise angle of a tilted head, the rustle of silk that must sound authentic even when worn by someone who will never naturally inhabit such garments. These boys represent one of the era's most remarkable theatrical conventions, where gender becomes performance art, and audiences willingly suspend disbelief to accept male voices speaking female truths. Around you, the tiring house bustles with the preparations necessary for transformation. Wigs made from real hair, often purchased from women in financial distress, hang on wooden blocks like disembodied personalities waiting to be assumed. Pots of ceruse, that dangerous white lead cosmetic that creates porcelain-perfect complexions at the cost of gradual poisoning, sit alongside rouge made from crushed cochineal beetles and coal, for darkening eyebrows. The boys submit to these preparations with the professional patience of craftsmen learning their trade. The youngest apprentice struggles with a particularly challenging passage, his voice cracking slightly as he attempts to convey the emotional complexity of a woman driven to desperation by circumstances beyond her control. His older companions offer gentle correction, their camaraderie born from shared challenges, and the peculiar intimacy that comes from helping each other become entirely different beings. In this era, when women are forbidden from performing on public stages, these boys carry the responsibility of embodying half of human experience for audiences hungry to see their complete emotional world reflected back at them. The late afternoon light streams through leaded windows, casting geometric patterns across the wooden floor, where tomorrow's queens and tragic heroines practice their craft. You hear in their careful vocal exercises the dedication required to make magic believable, the hours of patient work that transform natural voices into instruments capable of moving audiences to laughter, tears, and profound contemplation. In this quiet chamber of preparation, where boys become women, and apprentices become artists, you witness the fundamental alchemy of theatre, the way human dedication and imagination can transcend any limitation to reveal universal truths about love, loss, and the complexities of existence itself. You stand on the Guild Chapel Green in Stratford-upon-Avon, on a brilliant May morning in 1585, where Morris dancers leap and weave in ancient patterns that predate Christianity itself, their bells creating a symphony of silver sound that carries across the market square like scattered laughter. The sweet scent of hawthorn blossoms, May flowers gathered at dawn from hedgerows still damp with dew, mingles with the earthier aromas of trampled grass and the leather of the dancers' boots as they pound out rhythms older than memory on the sun-warmed ground. The 6 dancers wear the traditional costume of their craft, white shirts that catch and reflect the morning light, dark breeches cross-gartered with ribbons, and broad-brimmed hats adorned with ribbons that stream behind them like colorful memories of movement. Small bells sewn to their clothing create a percussion that follows every leap and turn, transforming their bodies into musical instruments that celebrate the return of spring to the English countryside. Their faces shine with exertion and joy as they perform the intricate steps passed down through generations of May Day celebrations. Around you, the entire community of Stratford has gathered to witness this annual ritual that marks winter's defeat and summer's promise. Children press close to the dancers, their eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle of grown men transformed into creatures of pure celebration. Mothers balance infants on their hips, while vendors move through the crowd selling sweet cakes made with the first honey of the season, and small ale flavored with woodruff, that herb whose white flowers smell of fresh hay and new-mown meadows. The pipe and tabor player stands at the circle's edge, his 3-holed flute producing the simple melody that guides the dancers through their intricate figures, while his small drum beaten with one hand provides the steady pulse that connects earth to sky. This music speaks to something deeper than entertainment. It represents the community's collective memory of cycles older than church bells, of celebrations that honor the fundamental rhythms of seed time and harvest, death, and rebirth. The maypole rises from the green center, its colored ribbons fluttering in the gentle breeze that carries the promise of warm days ahead. Young women will later weave these ribbons into complex patterns as they dance around the pole, creating a temporary tapestry of community celebration that will be undone and rewoven year after year in the endless cycle of seasonal observance. You feel the infectious joy that radiates from this gathering, the way music and movement can transform an ordinary market square into a sacred space where the human spirit celebrates its connection to the natural world. Here, in this moment of pure communal happiness, lies the counterpoint to melancholy, the affirmation of life that makes existence worth choosing despite all its sorrows and uncertainties. You close your eyes and let the haunting melody of the pipe and tabor wash over you as it echoes off the timber-framed building surrounding Stratford's Market Square. The simple 3-note tune carrying centuries of May Day tradition in its rising and falling phrases. The musician stands beneath the carved overhang of the Guildhall, his weathered face concentrated as his fingers dance across the holes of his small wooden flute, while his other hand beats a steady rhythm on the drum strapped to his waist. This ancient combination, pipe and tabor represents one of England's oldest musical partnerships, the sound that has accompanied country celebrations since before the Norman conquest. The melody floats across the cobblestones and up the narrow streets that branch off from the square like the spokes of a wheel, reaching into workshops where craftsmen pause in their labor to listen, into kitchens where housewives hum along while kneading bread, and through open casement windows where children lean out to catch every note. The pipe's clear, piercing tone cuts through the morning air with the purity of birdsong, while the table's steady pulse connects every listener to the earth beneath their feet and the ancient rhythms that govern all of life. You watch as the musician's simple melody transforms the ordinary business of market day into something magical. Merchants setting up their stalls move in time to the music, their footsteps falling naturally into the rhythm as they arrange their wares. Dogs wag their tails to the beat, and even the horses seem to step more lightly, their harness bells jingling in harmony with the celebration. The music creates an invisible thread that connects every person in the square, weaving them into a temporary community united by shared sound and seasonal joy. The tabor drum, no larger than a tambourine but deeper in voice, provides the heartbeat that grounds the pipe's soaring melody. Made from stretched sheepskin over a wooden frame, it speaks in the ancient language of percussion that humans have used since the first celebrations around prehistoric fires. The musician's practiced hand draws forth rhythms both complex and simple, sometimes matching the dancer's steps exactly, sometimes providing counterpoint that lifts their movements to new heights of grace. Between songs the square fills with the delighted chatter of neighbors greeting neighbors, children calling to friends, and the general buzz of a community gathered in celebration. But when the pipe begins its next tune, conversation fades, as if by instinct, allowing the music to reclaim its rightful place as the voice of collective joy. The sound bounces off stone walls and wooden shutters, creating natural reverb that enriches every note, and makes the humble market square feel as acoustically perfect as any cathedral. In this moment of pure musical communion, where simple melodies unlock the deepest human capacity for shared happiness, you understand how music serves as antidote to melancholy, offering proof that beauty exists, that joy remains possible, and that community can transform individual suffering into collective celebration. You stand at the edge of a golden wheat field in Warwickshire as September's harvest moon rises like a great copper coin above the rolling countryside, its amber light transforming the cut grain into something that seems spun from precious metal rather than humble English wheat. The air carries the rich scent of ripened grain mixed with the earthiness of freshly turned soil, where the stubble left by scythes releases the concentrated essence of a summer's growth into the cooling evening air. Around you, the ancient rhythm of harvest continues as it has for countless generations, connecting this moment to every autumn since humans first learned to gather grain against winter's approach. The moonlight illuminates the reapers who work by its glow, their curved sickles catching silver glints as they move through the remaining stands of wheat with practiced efficiency. These men and women understand that harvest time waits for no one, that grain left too long in the field may rot with the first autumn rains or be beaten down by wind that could destroy months of careful tending in a single night. Their movements create a gentle percussion as steel meets stalk, accompanied by the soft whisper of grain falling into neat rows behind each worker. You breathe deeply of air that tastes of abundance and completion, where the year's agricultural cycle reaches its culmination in fields that stretch toward distant villages marked by church spires and the warm glow of cottage windows. This is the England that feeds itself through communal labor, where entire communities turn out for harvest work that determines whether the coming winter will bring plenty or want. Children too young for heavy labor gather the fallen heads of grain that escape the adult workers, their laughter mixing with the more serious conversations of their elders who calculate yields and plan for the months ahead. The harvest moon, that traditional name for the full moon closest to autumn's equinox, provides the extra hours of light that make this extended working day possible. Its unusual brightness, caused by the low angle at which it rises during this season, has been a blessing to farmers across Europe for millennia. Tonight, as every harvest night, it transforms the ordinary work of gathering grain into something that feels almost ceremonial, connecting earthbound laborers to the cosmic rhythms that govern all life. In nearby barns, the grain already gathered awaits the threshing that will separate edible kernels from chaff. That ancient metaphor for distinguishing the valuable from the worthless that speaks to every human endeavor. The sweet smell of stored wheat mingles with the cooler air that signals autumn's arrival and winter's inevitable approach. As you watch these timeless scenes unfold beneath the harvest moon's benevolent light, you sense how this annual ritual of gathering and preparation speaks to the deepest human needs for security, community, and hope that tomorrow's bread will follow naturally from today's labor. You walk slowly through the beechwood outside Stratford-upon-Avon on a crisp October afternoon in 1596, where fallen leaves crackle beneath your leather boots with each deliberate step, their brittle voices creating a percussion of mortality that speaks to something deep within the melancholy that has settled over your spirit like autumn mist. The leaves, once the vibrant green of summer's promise, now lie in drifts of amber, russet and gold, their transformation complete from living tissue to delicate parchment that crumbles at the slightest touch, releasing the sweet, earthy scent of decay that signals nature's annual surrender to winter's approach. The woodland around you whispers, with the constant flutter of leaves, still clinging to branch and twig, their hold growing more tenuous, with each breath of wind that moves through the ancient trees. Some hang by the merest thread, trembling with every breeze, as if reluctant to join their fellows in the final descent to earth. Others release their grip with silent grace, spiraling downward in lazy circles that seem to slow time itself, each leaf a small meditation on letting go, on the inevitability of ending, on the strange beauty that can be found in surrender. Your footsteps disturb the layered carpet of seasons past, revealing darker leaves beneath the fresh fall. Last year's autumn now reduced to delicate skeletons that show the intricate architecture of veins and structure that once carried life-giving sap from root to tip. Beneath these, the previous year's leaves have become rich humus, returning their borrowed elements to the soil that will nourish next spring's growth in the endless cycle of death and renewal that governs all living things. The air carries the complex perfume of autumn. The sweet fermentation of fallen apples in distant orchards, the smoke of wood fires from cottage chimneys as households prepare for winter, and underlying it all the clean scent of approaching rain that will eventually wash away summer's last remnants and prepare the earth for winter's cleansing sleep. Each breath carries hints of mortality and rebirth, mingled together in autumn's bittersweet alchemy. As you pause beside a massive oak, whose thick trunk has weathered centuries of such seasonal transformations, you notice how the tree stands patient and enduring, while its leaves perform their annual dance of death. The oak will survive winter's barren months and burst forth again, with spring's returning warmth, but each leaf that falls represents a small death, a singular existence that cannot be renewed or recovered, gone forever into the eternal recycling that nature demands of all her children. In this quiet communion with autumn's profound lesson about impermanence and beauty, you find yourself wrestling with questions that have no easy answers, about what it means to accept endings, about whether the pain of existing outweighs its fleeting pleasures, and about what courage it takes to choose life when faced with loss that feels unbearable. You stand on London Bridge on a brilliant July morning in 1603, where the bronze voices of 100 church bells ring out across the Thames, in triumphant celebration of James I's coronation, their layered harmonies creating a symphony of joy that seems to lift the very stones of the ancient city toward heaven. The sound rolls over London in waves, from the great tenor bell of St. Paul's Cathedral to the smaller silver voices of parish churches tucked into narrow alleys, each bronze tongue proclaiming the dawn of a new reign and the end of England's anxious wait for Elizabeth's successor. The morning air shimmers with more than sound. It carries the mingled sense of celebration from every corner of the city. Wood smoke rises from countless bonfires where whole oxen roast in public squares, their savory aroma mixing with the sweeter perfume of marchpane confections and sugar subtleties created by London's finest confectioners for this historic day. Wine flows freely from hogsheads rolled into the streets by order of the new king, staining cobblestones purple, and filling the air with the rich bouquet of Gascon vintages that speak to England's renewed prosperity under Scottish rule. Around you, Londoners press together on the bridge's crowded walkway, their faces bright, with the peculiar joy that comes from witnessing history in the making. Merchants who shuttered their shops for this day of celebration stand beside apprentices freed from their usual labours, while gentlewomen lean from the upper windows of bridge houses to wave silk handkerchiefs at the crowds below. The democratic nature of public celebration transforms London's rigid social hierarchies into a temporary community of shared excitement, where duke and dustman alike marvel at the pageantry unfolding before them. The bells create their own weather system of sound, each peal echoing off timber-framed buildings and stone church walls before bouncing back across the Thames in diminishing repetitions that seem to multiply the music endlessly. The largest bells, those deep-voiced giants that require teams of ringers to set them swinging, provide the foundation for this aerial orchestra, while smaller bells dance above them in intricate patterns that speak to the mathematical precision hidden within apparent chaos. From your vantage point on the bridge, you can see the royal barges making their stately progress along the Thames, their silk banners snapping in the summer breeze, while oarsmen in royal livery pull in perfect rhythm toward Westminster. The water itself seems to celebrate, throwing back reflections of golden sunlight that dance and sparkle like scattered coins, celebrating England's peaceful transition from the Tudor age to this new Jacobean era. In this moment of national jubilation, where bells proclaim hope and crowds gather in shared witness to the continuity of crown and kingdom, you sense how such ceremonies bind communities together across time, creating memories that will echo in hearts long after the bronze voices fall silent and the crowds disperse to their daily labours. You press against the crowd lining Cheapside as King James I's coronation procession approaches through London's grandest commercial street, transformed for this July day in 1603 into a corridor of silk, gold thread, and living tapestries that rival anything the royal palaces can display. Every building facade has been draped with precious fabrics, crimson velvet cascading from upper windows, cloth of gold banners snapping in the summer breeze, and intricate embroideries depicting roses, thistles, and crowns that speak to the union of English and Scottish crowns under this new monarch from the north. The cobblestones beneath your feet have been scattered with fresh rushes and flower petals, their sweet fragrance rising with each footfall of the dense crowd gathered to witness history. Goldsmiths and mercers, the wealthy merchants whose shops normally define this street, have outdone themselves in decorative splendor, hanging precious plate in their windows and displaying silks from distant Cathay alongside English woolens that represent the kingdom's growing commercial power. The very air seems gilded with prosperity and anticipation. A thunderous roar announces the king's approach as mounted heralds round the corner from St. Paul's, their tabards blazing with royal arms, while their horses dance sideways under the pressure of the crowd's excitement. Behind them ride the great nobles of the realm, their own retinues adding layers of pageantry that speak to England's complex hierarchy of blood and favour. The Earl of Nottingham passes in cloth of silver, while the Earl of Worcester follows in deep purple velvet that catches the afternoon sun like liquid amethyst. Then comes the king himself, riding beneath a canopy of estate carried by gentlemen pensioners whose pikes catch the light like a forest of steel and gold. James appears smaller than his royal dignity demands, yet his presence transforms the street into something approaching the sacred, a mortal man who carries the weight of divine appointment in his person. The crowd's cheers create walls of sound that seem to lift the very timbers of the surrounding buildings, while women lean from upper windows to scatter rose petals that fall like fragrant snow upon the royal progress. Young apprentices scramble up lampposts and shop signs for better views, their excitement infectious as they wave caps and call blessings upon the new monarch, who represents both continuity and change for England's future. The royal musicians follow the king's horse, their trumpets adding martial harmony to the civilian celebration, while behind them roll the great coaches carrying Queen Anne and Prince Henry. The next generation of Stuart rule processing through streets that echo with unprecedented hope. As the procession continues toward Westminster, and the crowd begins to disperse, you sense how such moments of collective witness create the emotional bonds that hold kingdoms together, transforming individual subjects into a unified people through shared spectacle that will live in memory long after the silk banners fade, and the golden afternoon becomes history. You settle into a cushioned chair in the Earl of Southampton's private playhouse on a winter evening in 1604, where the sweet honeyed scent of pure beeswax candles fills the intimate chamber with golden light that transforms this converted great hall into a temple dedicated to theatrical art. Unlike the smoky tallow candles that illuminate common playhouses, these expensive tapers burn with steady flames that neither gutter nor smoke, their clean light revealing every nuance of expression on the actors' faces as they prepare to perform for an audience of perhaps 30 souls, the cream of Jacobean court society gathered for an evening of private entertainment. The warmth from dozens of candles creates a cocoon of comfort against the February cold that seeps through the manor's stone walls, while Turkish carpets underfoot muffle every footstep and absorb the sounds that would echo harshly in less refined spaces. The air carries subtle perfumes, ambergris from the pomanders worn by noble ladies, the lavender water used to scent their gloves, and the faint sweetness of hippocras, that spiced wine traditionally served at such refined gatherings, warming in silver vessels near the great fireplace. Around you, the elite of England's new Jacobean court arrange themselves in chairs, upholstered with silk damask and cloth of gold, their rich fabrics catching candlelight and throwing it back in subtle gleams that speak to wealth accumulated through royal favor, successful trade, or ancient inheritance. These are the patrons who make possible the finest theatrical art of the age. Men and women whose private purses support companies of players, commission new works, and provide the economic foundation that allows playwrights to explore themes too dangerous or complex for public stages. The intimate scale of this performance space allows for subtleties impossible in the globe's vast amphitheatre. Here, an actor's whispered aside reaches every ear, while a raised eyebrow or slight gesture carries weight that would be lost among 2,000 groundlings. The players acknowledge this intimacy by adjusting their performances, speaking in more conversational tones, while allowing their deepest emotions to play across features illuminated by the steady glow of expensive candles. The stage itself occupies one end of the hall, framed by tapestries depicting classical scenes that complement whatever drama unfolds before them. Musicians sit in a gallery above, their lutes and viols providing accompaniment that blends seamlessly with the performance below, while the actors move through their roles with the confidence that comes from performing for audiences who understand both the classical references and contemporary political allusions that pepper the finest dramatic writing of the age. In this sanctuary of privilege and artistic refinement, where candlelight creates beauty and wealth provides sanctuary for dangerous ideas, you sense how private performances allow exploration of themes that might prove too provocative for public consumption, including profound meditations on mortality that speak directly to the anxieties of those who hold power in an uncertain world. You lean forward slightly in your silk-cushioned chair as the Countess of Pembroke whispers behind her ivory fan, her words barely audible above the Danish prince's soliloquy yet carrying the electric charge that court gossip always brings to these intimate theatrical gatherings. The flickering candlelight creates perfect conditions for such confidential exchanges, casting dancing shadows that conceal facial expressions while the actors' voices provide natural cover for conversations that could prove dangerous if overheard by the wrong ears in James I's increasingly paranoid court. The air grows thick with more than beeswax smoke, as news passes from ear to ear in the softest possible murmurs. Rumors about the recent gunpowder plot trials, whispers concerning which Catholic families remain under suspicion, and speculation about the King's latest financial demands on Parliament. These aristocratic audiences understand that attending private theatrical performances serves purposes beyond entertainment. Such gatherings provide neutral ground where political alliances can be tested, information exchanged, and the complex web of court favor carefully navigated through seemingly casual conversation. Behind you, the Earl of Essex's widow shifts in her chair, the rustle of her silk farthingale creating the perfect moment for her companion to lean close and share intelligence about which courtiers currently enjoy royal favour, and which have fallen from grace. The intimate scale of this domestic playhouse transforms every seat into a potential confidential booth, where the real drama often unfolds among the audience rather than upon the stage. Your ear catches fragments of hushed discussion about monopolies granted and revoked, about debts owed to Italian bankers, about marriages being negotiated between great houses seeking to strengthen their positions in an uncertain political landscape. The actor's meditation on mortality provides ironic counterpoint to these worldly concerns, his words about the undiscovered country of death seeming to hover over conversations focused entirely on survival in the very terrestrial realm of Jacobean politics. Between the prince's lines you hear the soft scratch of silk against silk, as ladies adjust their positions to whisper more efficiently, while gentlemen communicate through subtle nods and meaningful glances that speak volumes about alliances formed and broken in the dangerous game of court advancement. The performance continues, but you sense that many here use the darkened theatre as cover for the kind of intelligence gathering that keeps ambitious families afloat in treacherous political waters. A slight cough signals agreement, a fan's movement conveys disapproval, while the strategic sharing of a perfumed handkerchief creates opportunity for the briefest exchange of written messages that could determine fortunes or seal fates depending on their contents. In this shadowed world where art and politics intertwine like lovers in a dangerous dance, you witness how the most profound questions about existence become backdrop for the eternal human struggle for power, position, and the simple desire to survive another day, in a world where favour can shift as quickly as candle flame in an evening breeze. You sit by the diamond-paned windows of New Place on a gentle April morning in 1610, listening to spring rain drumming against the thick thatch that crowns this finest house in Stratford-upon-Avon, purchased with London gold and transformed into a refuge from the demanding world of theatres, patrons, and the endless hunger for new plays that feeds the capital's entertainment. The sound creates a natural percussion above your head, thousands of droplets finding their way through layers of golden straw that have weathered Warwickshire's seasons since skilled thatchers laid them with the ancient craft passed down through generations of rural builders. The rain brings with it the rich scent of earth awakening from winter's sleep, mingling with the sweet perfume of apple blossoms from the orchard that stretches behind the house toward the Guild Chapel where you once sat as a schoolboy passing Latin verses. Through the leaded glass you watch rivulets form and merge, as they trace silver paths down the window panes, each droplet catching what little light filters through the overcast sky, before joining the greater flow that will eventually find its way to the Avon and thence to distant seas. Inside this substantial dwelling, the second largest house in Stratford, with its 10 hearths and multiple chambers that speak to prosperity earned through words and performances, the atmosphere grows contemplative as rain creates its own form of enclosure. The oak-panelled walls seem to absorb sound and create the perfect conditions for reflection, while the great hall's high ceiling catches and amplifies the rain's rhythm until it becomes a natural music that encourages thoughts to flow as freely as water from the eaves. Your writing desk sits positioned to catch the best available light from the tall windows, its surface bearing the accumulated tools of a lifetime spent transforming thoughts into profitable entertainment, quills cut from goose feathers, pots of ink made from oak gall and iron filings, and sheets of expensive paper that represent significant investment in the possibility of inspiration. The rain's steady presence makes this indoor sanctuary feel even more secure, a place where memories of London's urgency fade into something approaching peace. The fire in the great hearth settles with a soft whisper, adding its warmth to the cocoon of comfort that spring rain and solid walls create around you. Outside, Stratford streets will be turning to mud, while farmers curse the timing that threatens newly planted crops, but here in this prosperous retirement from the world of public performance, the rain becomes simply another voice in the symphony of domestic tranquility that success has purchased. In this moment of gentle precipitation and indoor contemplation, surrounded by the tangible evidence of artistic achievement transformed into brick and timber security, you find yourself returning to questions that have haunted your work for decades, meditations on the nature of existence itself, and whether the storms of life make shelter worth the struggles required to build it. You walk through the orchard behind New Place, on a misty May morning in 1611, where gardeners work among the apple and pear trees, with the methodical patience that marks skilled horticulture, in an age when a gentleman's fruit garden represents both practical investment and aesthetic statement. The soft thud of spades entering rain-soaked earth creates a gentle rhythm, as workers plant new saplings along carefully planned rows, their movements guided by generations of inherited knowledge about soil, season, and the ancient partnership between human cultivation and nature's reluctant cooperation. The air carries the rich scent of turned earth, mixed with the delicate perfume of apple blossoms, their white petals drifting down like gentle snow to carpet the pathways between established trees, whose gnarled trunks speak of decades spent transforming sunlight into the sweet fruit that will grace winter tables when fresh food becomes memory. You breathe deeply of this mingled sweetness, earth and bloom, labor and promise, while watching men whose hands understand the subtle art of coaxing abundance from Warwickshire's clay soil. The head gardener, a weathered man whose face bears the permanent tan that comes from a lifetime spent under English skies, directs the placement of young fruit trees with the authority of someone who thinks in seasons rather than days. His apprentices listen carefully as he explains the mysteries of proper planting depth, the importance of southern exposure, and the delicate timing that determines whether a sapling will thrive or merely survive its first crucial winter in new ground. Around you, the established orchard displays the fruits of such patient labor, pear trees heavy, with small green fruit that will ripen to golden sweetness by autumn's harvest, while apple trees promise the winter storage that makes fresh fruit possible during the lean months when ships bring no provisions from warmer lands. The orderly rows speak to the Renaissance ideal of imposed harmony, when nature's wild abundance yields to human planning and creates beauty through controlled cultivation. The gardeners work with tools their fathers used, iron spades worn smooth by countless hands, wooden measures marked with the accumulated wisdom of successful plantings, and baskets woven from willow that grows along the nearby Avon. Each new tree represents hope planted in earth, an act of faith that next year's seasons will follow this year's patterns, that careful tending will yield abundance, and that the future remains worth preparing for, despite uncertainty's constant presence. Between the established trees, herbs grow in neat plots, rosemary for remembrance, thyme for courage, and sage for wisdom, the aromatic pharmacy that every prosperous household maintains against illness, and to flavor the monotony of preserved winter foods. Their fragrances mix with apple sweetness, to create perfumes more complex than any costly imported scent. In this careful cultivation of growth and beauty, where human labor partners with natural cycles to create sustenance and pleasure, you witness the essential optimism that drives all planting, the faith that tomorrow's harvest justifies today's effort. You kneel on the worn stone floor of Holy Trinity Church as April twilight deepens beyond the stained glass windows, where the familiar words of evening prayer drift through the ancient limestone sanctuary like incense, their cadences marking the end of another day in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1613. The air carries the lingering sweetness of beeswax from altar candles mixed with the mustiness that never quite leaves these medieval walls, while your breath forms small clouds in the perpetual chill that even spring cannot entirely banish from this sacred space, where generations have sought comfort against life's uncertainties. Around you, the congregation settles into the rhythm of communal prayer that has shaped English spiritual life since the Reformation transformed Catholic ritual into Protestant practice, their voices joining in responses that speak to shared faith wrestling with private doubts. The vicar's words echo from the carved pulpit as he guides evening worship through the Book of Common Prayer, that compromise document that attempts to unite England's fractured religious landscape under language that offers comfort without demanding theological precision from ordinary believers. The stained glass grows darker as daylight fades, transforming the jeweled windows from brilliant illumination into shadowy mysteries that barely catch the candlelight flickering from iron sconces along the nave. This daily transition from light to darkness within the church walls mirrors the larger questions that haunt human consciousness. The movement from certainty to doubt, from hope to fear, from the known world of earthly experience to the undiscovered country that awaits beyond mortality's threshold. Your mind wanders as prayers continue, drawn to the memorial brasses set into the floor around you that mark the final resting places of Stratford's worthy dead. These engraved figures lie in eternal repose with hands folded in prayer, their Latin inscriptions promising resurrection, while their very presence speaks to the certainty of death that makes all earthly achievement seem temporary. The cold stone beneath your knees reminds you of your own mortality, while the familiar prayers offer whatever comfort ritual can provide against the fundamental mystery of existence. The congregation's murmured responses create a percussion of faith that fills the vaulted space with human voices united in ancient formulas, designed to ease the transition from day's activities to night's uncertain rest. Children lean against their mothers, while merchants who spent the day calculating profits now contemplate accounts that cannot be balanced with earthly arithmetic. The shared vulnerability of evening prayer strips away the day's pretenses and reveals the common humanity that underlies all social distinctions. As the service continues and shadows deepen in the church's corners, you sense how these nightly gatherings serve purposes beyond theological instruction. They provide community comfort against the darkness, both literal and metaphorical, that waits beyond these protective walls, offering whatever solace collective faith can bring to individual souls, wrestling with questions that have no easy answers about the meaning and value of human existence. You sit alone in your study at New Place on a November evening in 1615. Feeling the accumulated weight of 51 years settling into your bones like the dampness that seeps through even the finest Warwickshire stonework as winter approaches. The fire in the grate burns low, casting wavering shadows across manuscript pages that represent decades of wrestling with words, while your hands, once agile enough to write 3 plays a year, now move more slowly across paper that seems to hold memories of every character you've ever brought to life, and buried in the space of 2 hours. Traffic on a stage. The candlelight illuminates the lines that have deepened around your eyes, marks left by London's smoke, and the strain of reading by insufficient light, while your fingers trace the worn surface of your writing desk, where countless quills have scratched out comedies, histories and tragedies that transformed Provincial William into something approaching immortality. Yet tonight, the weight of accumulated experience presses down with particular force, bringing with it the recognition that the years of peak creative power may be settling into the quieter rhythms of age and reflection. Your breath forms small clouds in the cooling air, each exhalation visible proof of life continuing despite the gradual diminishment that marks all mortal existence. The ache in your joint speaks to decades of London winters spent in unheated theatres, while the slight tremor in your left hand reminds you that time's passage shows itself in such small surrenders, long before the final accounting arrives. These physical reminders of mortality carry their own melancholy wisdom about the body's honest testimony against the mind's protests. Through the diamond-paned windows, Stratford sleeps beneath a sky heavy with approaching snow, its familiar streets and buildings representing the solid English prosperity that playwriting has purchased. New Place itself stands as monument to artistic success transformed into brick and timber security, yet even this substantial achievement feels temporary when measured against the eternal questions that have driven your greatest work. Meditations on existence, duty, love, and the meaning that humans create against the backdrop of inevitable ending. The completed manuscripts resting in your oak chest represent life's work approaching conclusion. Each play a different exploration of what it means to be human in an uncertain world. From the youthful comedies that celebrated love's triumph over obstacle to the late romances that seek reconciliation between loss and hope, these works trace the arc of a mind grappling with questions that have no final answers, yet demand continuous asking. As the fire settles lower and the room grows dimmer, you contemplate the strange alchemy that transforms individual suffering and joy into art that speaks to strangers across time, wondering if the Danish prince whose questions about existence once flowed from your pen will outlive the flesh that gave him voice, carrying forward into unknown futures the eternal human struggle to find meaning in the brief span between birth and whatever undiscovered country awaits beyond mortality's threshold. You stand by the low stone wall that borders the gardens of New Place on a hushed April morning in 1616, watching mist rise from the river Avon like the gentle breath of sleeping countryside awakening to another day in Warwickshire. The vapour drifts upward in delicate columns that catch the early light and transform the familiar landscape into something ethereal and temporary, as if the solid world of fields and footpaths were dissolving into the realm of dreams and memory that lies beyond the reach of ordinary sight. The air carries the clean scent of river water, mixed with the green perfume of new grass and unfurling leaves that speak to spring's quiet resurrection after winter's long dominion over the English countryside. Your breath mingles with the morning mist as you stand wrapped in a heavy woolen cloak, feeling the dampness settle on your skin, like the gentle touch of time itself, while blackbirds call from the orchard trees with voices that seem to pierce through the veil between waking and sleeping, between this moment and all the moments that have led to this still hour beside England's second longest river. The Avon flows with the steady persistence that has marked its passage through this landscape since before Roman engineers built their first roads across Britain, its current carrying stories from the Cotswold Hills, where it rises toward the Severn estuary, where it will join the greater waters that connect England to distant shores. The mist obscures the far bank, creating an island of visibility around your solitary figure, while the rest of the world fades into grey uncertainty that mirrors the boundary between the known and unknowable that haunts all human understanding. From somewhere in the town behind you comes the sound of a church bell marking the hour, its bronze voice cutting through the soft air to remind all who hear it that time continues its forward movement, even in moments that feel suspended outside ordinary duration. The bell's resonance fades gradually into the mist, leaving only the gentle murmur of water moving over stone and the distant lowing of cattle being led to morning pasture by farmers who begin their daily labours, while gentlemen contemplate the beauty that their prosperity allows them leisure to observe. The mist begins to thin as the sun climbs higher, revealing glimpses of the opposite shore, where willows trail their new leaves in the current, and water meadows stretch toward distant villages marked by church spires and rising smoke from cottage chimneys. This gradual revelation feels like a metaphor for understanding itself. The slow lifting of veils that allow human consciousness to perceive truths that were always present, but hidden by the limitations of perspective and the mysteries that shroud existence itself. As you stand witness to this daily miracle of light overcoming darkness and clarity emerging from obscurity, you sense how such moments of natural beauty provide whatever consolation the physical world can offer against the profound questions that consciousness brings to every thinking being who must choose, moment by moment, to continue existing in a universe whose ultimate purposes remain forever veiled in morning mist. You trace your fingers across the carved inscription in Holy Trinity Church's chancel floor, where words cut into Warwickshire limestone preserve both blessing and curse for future generations, who will stand where you now kneel on this quiet afternoon in 1623, 7 years after the poet's death. The stone feels cold beneath your touch, its surface worn smooth by the passage of countless feet. Yet the carved letters remain sharp enough to catch shadows that make the Latin warning clearly visible. Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. The afternoon light filtering through stained glass windows illuminates these mortal remains of England's greatest wordsmith, transformed now from living flesh into carved memorial that speaks with stone tongue about the universal destination that awaits all human ambition. The irony strikes you with particular force that a man who spent his life breathing vitality into fictional characters through spoken words should now communicate only through chisel marks in limestone, his voice reduced to the silent testimony of permanent inscription. Around you, the church holds its ancient silence, broken only by the soft footsteps of occasional visitors, who come to pay respects to the provincial glover's son, whose imagination conquered London stages, and transformed the English language itself into something richer and more flexible than any previous generation had possessed. The carved effigy above the grave shows him holding a quill, that simple goose feather that served as the instrument through which ordinary William became extraordinary Shakespeare, creator of kings and beggars alike. The bust itself, carved from local stone by London craftsmen who knew the living face, gazes out across the sanctuary with eyes that seem to hold both wisdom and melancholy, as if the sculptor understood that even the most enduring art serves ultimately as meditation on impermanence. The hands positioned as if writing capture forever the gesture that once moved across countless pages, bringing into existence the Danish prince, who questioned whether existence itself justified its accompanying suffering. You think of all the words that flowed from that now stilled hand, the comedies that made audiences forget their troubles, the histories that transformed English kings into archetypes of power and its corruptions, and the tragedies that gave voice to the deepest human fears about mortality, madness, and the search for meaning in an indifferent universe. Those words outlive the flesh that wrote them, continuing to speak across centuries to hearts that recognize their own struggles, reflected in timeless characters who embody eternal human truths. The stone grows warmer under your continued touch, as if responding to the contact between living flesh and carved memorial, reminding you that all monuments serve primarily to comfort the living rather than preserve the dead. In this sacred space where Stratford honors its most famous son, you sense how artistic creation represents humanity's deepest response to mortality. The transformation of temporary existence into permanent beauty that continues speaking long after individual voices fall silent, carrying forward into unknown futures the questions about being and non-being that define conscious life.